Hannah, thank you so much for joining today. Can you start by telling us a bit about your role as program manager for Sprocket?
Yeah, absolutely. I do program management here, which relates a lot to Sprocket's Innovation Hub work, where we work with entrepreneurs, helping them go from idea stage to growing, scaling their company, and hopefully to exiting it. So, a lot of that looks like designing programs for meeting that educational need or creating networking opportunities where entrepreneurs get to meet valuable connections to mentors or subject matter experts. We try to meet our founders where they're at.
That's a big bulk of what we do. So you're really busy day to day.
Pretty much, yeah.
So before we dive into the nitty gritty, taking an idea to reality, share a bit about your own journey and how did you become involved in the world of entrepreneurship to begin with?
I would say I got involved pretty early on in that my mom's midlife crisis was to become a farmer. And so farmers actually are very entrepreneurial and gritty in their own way, where they take ideas for how to grow something and just master that. I watched my mom start this business when I was 12 and then got to see other farms start. And then I actually met my husband through our farm, and he had this great idea for a organic record keeping software where it's like there's got to be a better way to do this. And we actually learned about Sprocket through this West Kentucky Innovation Challenge for if you have a technical idea but don't know how to get started, run through the program. And I got to watch his journey through that. And that's kind of how I got involved with entrepreneurship, is just seeing other people do it and loving being a part of that like startup culture of we don't know what we're doing yet, but we're figuring it out as we go.
What's something that really stood out to you about that community that drew you in?
I really like the kind of it could be done better. I think growing up in the military and moving around, I got to see a lot of different cultures and communities and knowing that there's not one way to do something. And so I always would get frustrated when I'd hear people say, like, well, we've always done it this way, or we've never tried that. And it's like, well, that's the perfect opportunity to try something different. And so that's what I love about entrepreneurs, is that willingness to think outside the box and just be like, let's try something different. Let's do it better.
I didn't put two and two together until just now, but
Mhm.
how full circle is it that your first stepping stone into Sprocket was with the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge? And right now, you're our programs manager who is putting together our next iteration of the challenge. And your husband, who was a initial participant, is now our entrepreneur growth coach and is instructing in the challenge too. That's
Mhm.
really cool.
It is. And that's actually one of the things I love about Sprocket is it creates opportunities for people to not just step in the door, but actually engage and become more a part of the community. Where a lot of places I feel like, well, maybe you can show up and be there, but you kind of stop at a certain level. And Sprocket very much is like, no, no, if you want to engage, we'll bring you in. We're going to take you up the ladder with us.
Oh, absolutely. I can look back on the past year and watch journeys from individuals who came to coffee hour just one time and then kept showing up and then kept
Hmm.
engaging and participating, started coming to programs and events and are now serving as mentors. It's a wide open door. And I love that about this community. It's not just a place where you can come and receive, but it's a place where you can come and give your wisdom too
Absolutely.
and find out what wisdom you have to give.
No kidding. As well as sharing just the bumps along the way, where that's actually some of the best wisdom is a like, yeah, watch out for that pothole, or like, I totally tried this and it flopped. And there's so much more to learn there. We're all trying new things here, and there isn't as much fear of that failure here at Sprocket.
Cool. And a big part of that, and one thing that you've been talking here recently as we've been putting together the challenge, is the process of taking an idea from just a glimmer of an idea to an actual business concept that you can
Hmm.
build a business model around, a business plan around. And so I think having a process that you can trust and iterate on also helps quell those fears too. Tell us about that process and how the Innovation Challenge trains us in that process.
Yeah. So there's kind of this tried and true method to how you take an idea and iterate through it to where you have a viable solution that comes out on the other end. And so, what we're trying to teach in the Innovation Challenge is okay, so you have an idea. Let's go validate that it actually is something that people are interested by, that they feel is a pain point in their life, would love a solution for. And then let's start designing like, what is the first actionable step that you could take to testing? Okay, people told you they're interested, but how would they engage it? Do they engage it in the way you think? And so that's what I really also like about entrepreneurs is it's a constant growth process. Just because you have something that works today doesn't mean it's going to work in a year. But in some ways that's kind of freeing too because it means that there's always opportunities to change and iterate. So once you have your idea designed, maybe that's via a flyer or your first prototype, then we teach you about, okay, how could you structure this to where you could make money, you could get funding for it? How would you build partnerships to help you get the word out and it become bigger than yourself? And from there, we hope that by the end, all participants are going to have a roadmap of like, okay, at least for the next few months or years, however long you want to plan it for, here's my actionable steps of where I'm going to go. Because I think that's actually one of the most daunting things when you're doing things by yourself is I'm not sure where I'm going and I'm afraid to go it alone.
And there's so many steps that you could take. You feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by stepping stones, and all you need to know, like, you have the gumption, you've got the grit, you're
Mm-hmm.
willing to put in the work, but you want to make sure you're not wasting your time and taking the right next steps.
Absolutely.
And that's what this challenge is for.
Mm-hmm.
Diving deeper into that, when an entrepreneur has a new idea, what are the first steps they should take to begin turning that idea into reality?
Absolutely. So, one of the big things that we encourage people on is to make sure they are crystal clear on what the problem is. A lot of times, as entrepreneurs, we see the problem and then we are immediately filled with ideas of, oh, we could solve it this way, or maybe that way. And actually, we try to give people the tools to make sure that they clearly understand the problem and have like validated who experiences it, how many people experience it. Is it enough of a pain point that they're willing to change their behavior? Because that's a lot of what any new idea is trying to do is change the status quo. And so through our first lesson in the challenge, we teach customer discovery. Actually, you're going to be teaching that, which we're super excited about. That's just how do you ask the right questions to make sure that you understand all the ins and outs of how people experience this. Because once you have that, you are going to constantly be taking that information in and using it towards your designing process of, okay, I know people tend to solve the problem this way, but maybe it could be better that way. Or maybe they take these steps beforehand and I need to be thinking about that as I'm building the solution so that the solution fits into their flow. So that's kind of the first step whenever we talk with entrepreneurs is teaching that customer discovery process, making sure you've asked the right questions so you know exactly what the problem is, all sides inside and out.
Mm-hmm. So the very first step, if I've got an idea, is just to start listening, asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of doing some ground level research to make sure, is this even a problem that exists outside of myself?
Mm-hmm.
And how do people experience that problem and what impact does it have on them day to day?
Absolutely.
And to do that, you've got to ask questions. And I think that also helps us get out of the idea phase because the idea phase is a really comfortable place to sit in because you still have the excitement of what could be sitting on that horizon. And failure is something that doesn't really exist yet because you're
Yep.
in the idea phase. What do you think are the most important steps to take to get out of that idea phase and get comfortable with stepping out?
Everybody's going to approach it a little bit differently, but having some like tangible way to commit where a lot of times that is connecting with someone and saying, hey, I'm going to have this prototype to you in 2 weeks. or I would love to sit down and talk with you about this problem. I find personally that other people are a really great motivator for helping get ideas off the ground because then it becomes bigger than you. If it stays in your head as just an idea, there's no failure, there's no commitment to like moving forward, and it can be a really comfortable place to be. But one of my favorite phrases is ideas are a dime a dozen, and what really matters is execution, being able to take that first step. So often, what we recommend to entrepreneurs is we try and help them figure out that first step they can take and being like, is it sitting down with someone? Is it building something that people can try? Or is it maybe going and getting more education? Kind of depends on the journey.
I think one of the things that you and I talk about often as well is not being married to your idea, which is a
Mhm.
theme that I'm hearing you talk about right now. Once you learn the process of ideating, iterating, innovating, which is a process that you can rely on and trust, then you realize that you can manufacture ideas. Ideas can come.
Mhm.
Whereas maybe if you're a new entrepreneur and you have this idea, it feels like your golden ticket
Yeah.
and you're never going to get another one. And so if it doesn't work or you get bad feedback, it feels so crushing.
Absolutely.
So I feel like if you're a seasoned entrepreneur and you get bad feedback and you're like, well, I'll just keep going
Mhm.
because more is coming and I know I can iterate. Tell me more about that, about kind of letting go of this hold on the idea that you have and knowing that you can iterate on it and you can innovate, even for those who don't have an idea yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad you bring up this fear that a lot of entrepreneurs have. In that, one of the things we try to help with at Sprocket is getting out of that fixed mindset where ideas, there's a lot. And when you learn the process, what you start to do is you start trusting yourself to be that idea generator. And so part of this innovation challenge that we hope is, a lot of people may have an idea that they want to play with. Some people may just want to learn the process, in which case, what we're hoping you get is actually a deeper trust in yourself to know, okay, I know how to think through an idea, vet whether it's a good idea, and then go test it and see if it's viable. Where once you have that, I think it really is like jumping that chasm of, okay, I have an idea, but I trust that this isn't just my one golden ticket. This is one of numerous to come. And so I can play with it and iterate on it because there'll always be more. It's always a growing pie. I really enjoy that piece where it's like you just constantly have opportunities that you don't know about.
Let's break down some of the definitions that we're tossing around here.
Mhm.
We're talking about iterating and validating
Mhm.
and viable ideas. Let's take those one by one and break those down, even for those who are new entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. Some of this jargon that feels kind of
Mhm.
normal for people who are in this space are new. And I'm thinking back to myself, a year ago before I stepped into Sprocket, those were kind of high level words that seemed daunting to me. And now we're
Mhm.
just, we're iterating all the time. And so let's take the word iterating and what does that even mean? And what does that look like for an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I really like thinking about iteration as this like constant tweaking where it's not drastic change of like, oh my gosh, this didn't work. We have to turn the boat around. It's okay, this didn't work, but maybe 90% of it did, and we could try something slightly different. Just seeing if there's a different way you can frame it. And so you're not scrapping your whole idea. You're just trying to change little bits to test and see, does this work better if I try something a little different?
What does it mean to validate an idea and how important is that?
Yeah, so validation, it's actually one of my favorite terms in that we so often go through life and are just constantly in the process of experiencing it. And we're not actually checking to verify that, like, was I right about this? Or did I understand that correctly? I think a lot of times it gets used in like a therapy term, but it's also really important in business forms too, where it's checking with the people that you engage with, your potential customers or maybe your partners, and saying, hey, did this work for you? I think you experienced it this way, but was that actually true? And sometimes that's in the form of a conversation. Other times there's little like kind of tweaks you can do. You see this a lot in your social media feed where they moved the button on the screen a little bit and they can track and see like, okay, are people using that button as much? Validation is just like checking and verifying if what you know is actually happening.
Cool. So it's married to this idea of having a hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that we teach in the Innovation Challenge. Talk about how we test a hypothesis and how we even, we think about that in like a science term.
Yeah.
So what does that mean in entrepreneurial sense?
Yeah, I really love like we use the scientific method more than we realize.
Ooh,
It doesn't always have to be like you wrote out in your midterm paper of we had this and tested X and got Y.
it's
Um,
horrible.
right. Nobody really, or at least I didn't enjoy that as much. So in business, in ideating an idea, you're basically coming up with this like, I think people will do this, or my idea might land this way. And so a hypothesis is just the articulation of what you think will happen. And I actually think that's really important to that process of getting it out of your head and onto whether that's a piece of paper or honestly into the world where it's so easy. We don't realize how much lives in our head. And we can't actually test something, we can't validate it unless we are clear on, well, what am I checking for?
I'm sure you can come up with examples or just remember entrepreneurs who came in, they were so locked into their idea
Mm-hmm.
and the way that the things that they thought were true, they just knew it, and they would refuse to listen to outside feedback or to even pursue customer discovery. And what happens to those businesses? How far do they make it?
A lot of times they'll get like to a certain point, and it really depends on the business, but there's two places that it can occur. One is in just getting their idea off the ground, where they get frustrated of like, I know this is a problem and people should be adopting it readily. They should be, using my product regularly. But if people don't actually experience it, then maybe your hypothesis was wrong. The other place, and this can happen really commonly, is maybe the entrepreneur had a idea and there was a bigger group of people that experienced the pain point, but it wasn't as big as they thought. And so when they go to grow their company, they're like, okay, we've got our product. We want to now get it bigger and into more people's hands. Then they go to scale and it's like, but they didn't really understand the problem. And so businesses fail at those 2 points of it's basically trying to get more people to adopt the idea or the product.
So why is it so important then entrepreneurs to trust the process, even though it feels like, oh, I have to test my hypothesis, I have to go through customer discovery. I just want to skip to the next step. How can they trust the process and develop patience and perseverance, especially during those early stages?
Absolutely. And that really is hard in that, it's easy to want to just jump ahead. I think one of the ways I encourage people to look at it is part of what you're doing is you're building your expertise. You may already be an expert in your field and know all the ins and outs of, let's say, like electrical engineering. But when you're launching an idea, it actually touches so many more fields that entrepreneurs wear a lot of hats. And so trying to make sure you understand you're building your reservoir of knowledge. You want to become the number one person who understands my customer experiences this problem and it gets solved this way. So looking at it as an opportunity for you to grow as well as understanding that this is a constant process. Entrepreneurs and business owners should be doing this regularly to make sure that they're staying relevant, that they're not falling off the bandwagon. And so getting comfortable with the process allows you to engage it more regularly, making sure that you're getting all the information you need to make your next decision and be well informed.
What are some key entrepreneurial skills that you think make a great founder? And,
Mhm.
we talked about patience and perseverance, trusting the process. What other skills can entrepreneurs cultivate that they'll also find cultivated in the innovation challenge?
Yeah. So I think one of them is actually playfulness. I think a lot of people, like we've been talking about, there's this fear. And actually, the antidote to fear isn't necessarily courage, but it's curiosity. And so, learning to be comfortable with playing with your idea, being willing to put it out there. I think about how little kids on the playground, they constantly are like, look at this new thing, or let's share. Like, there isn't a like that internal baggage that we build up as adults to your ideas. And it's wonderful to see of just that sharing. And so I hope through the Innovation Challenge, playfulness is one thing that people get out of it. The other thing that, besides deep listening and patience, is we hope to kind of give people the confidence to know that they can speak more. I don't want that edited. What's the word I'm going for here? We want to give people the confidence to be able to have the next level conversation like we're doing right now, where we're defining terms, we're giving concepts about how to do entrepreneurship and idea testing. We want to give participants that knowledge of okay, the next person you talk to, maybe it's a coach here at Sprocket or a bank officer or wherever you want to go next, you have the language to actually speak at the next level and move your business forward. That's part of what I think is iterative as well. We're always growing as people. And being able to have those higher level conversations of oh, I know how to talk to a marketer now, or to talk to someone in finances about my business, building that kind of concept and knowledge that you can take with you anywhere.
We help you build the context of your business so you're able to understand what your own needs are and communicate those
Exactly.
and find the right resource. And one thing that Sprocket does so effectively is we can see where you are and know who to connect you to next. And
Mhm.
we make that connection, help lead you there, which I think is so beautiful about this space. And I love the playfulness idea. And I don't think anything that Sprocket does could be considered stodgy or so let's talk a little bit more about the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge. So this is like our entrepreneur training program where people with an idea or people who want to have an idea can come learn the essentials of taking that idea and turning it into a business concept. Walk us through the program, what you'll get out of it, and who it's for.
Absolutely. We want this to be for all ideas people, whether that's you are just dipping your toe in and have never really tried launching an idea, to you've been in your field for years and you know there's a better way to do something. So we want it to be all the ideas people out there coming through the program. Kind of the structure of how we see it going is, so this is going to be a flipped classroom style where we have pre-recorded lessons for you to watch on your own time, provide that flexibility for when you're ready to learn and engage. Those will come out weekly. And then we want to have in-person sprint sessions where the real magic happens when you can actually take that work of, okay, I learned this concept, I did the exercise at home. Now, let's brainstorm with our peers and our coaches of, okay, what do we do next? Or what are we stuck on that we could workshop together? Where that's one of my favorite things about Sprocket is you see so many of these sparks of it's getting it out of your head And then you can like see how other people respond to it. And that's a lot of magic to me.
It's really energizing.
This is a 6-week course at the moment, and we are going to take you through customer discovery. How do you interview and ask the right questions? Then we're going to teach like what's a very lean, rough draft business plan. And it's going to be able to fit on a note card. We're not going to ask you to fill out a huge packet that you could take to the bank. We want you to just think about, okay, here's the structural components that you might need to run a business. And, let's kind of run with that idea. From there, we are going to talk about how do you design your first prototype, or maybe it's an ad, that getting that actionable piece that you can start engaging with people on. After that, we get into more of the structural components of, okay, so now you've heard from people about the problem. You've got an idea for how it could look to solve it. Okay, what are the like fundamentals of like, how would you make money off of this? How would you build partnerships so that you are more successful? And then there is a funding opportunities piece where we talk about all the ways that like starting a business requires capital, and what are the different avenues you can kind of pursue for just getting it off the ground. And then the very final session is actually developing your roadmap and creating your pitch. So you've done all this work to figure out what's possible, a structure, what's a possible solution you can run with on your idea. Now, how do you tell that story so that other people buy in? And what's your next steps to make sure that it doesn't stop here? That's one of our big things with this challenge is we don't want this to be, okay, you went through and that was it. It fell on the table. We want to see this grow and expound and get you into the rest of the Sprocket network so that you can keep iterating and innovating your idea.
And hopefully some of our next Sprocket mentors are in this cohort that's coming through.
Yeah.
So how can listeners learn more about the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge and go ahead and apply?
Yeah. So the easiest way to apply is to search our website for the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge. I believe it's at sprocketpaducah/challenge.
Mm-hmm.
There's a short form. Because we know this is an idea stage, what we want to know is just a rough, 1 to 2 sentence. What's your idea? What experience do you have? And then we have a couple of background questions on you, which is actually helpful for our grant funding. And then you will be signed up. We'll have a kickoff call on September 4th. That just gets you to meet and greet with the coaches and learn a little bit more about what to expect upcoming. If you want to learn more, you're more than welcome to email me as program manager. My email is hannah@sprocketpaducah.com. And we could definitely hook you up with talking to some of the past participants, people that have been through it if you want to know more about their experience.
And lastly, for those listening who have an idea or even just want to have an idea, but they're not sure where to start, what would you say to them?
Oh, definitely just engaging. Like one of the biggest hurdles is not actually taking any action. That's what Sprocket tries to provide is these opportunities to engage, whether that's coming to coffee hour, joining our innovation challenge, just even coming for a tour in our co-working space. We want to give you the first step towards like believing in yourself and believing in your ideas.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us today and for sharing everything about innovation and iterating and taking an idea from start to finish and introducing us to the Innovation Challenge. Thank you so much.